All right, friends. So tonight we have Motlalepule sharing with us on a very important topic of, how to master fear. Uh, so Motlalepule, over to you.
Thanks very much. So this is a presentation that I did a little while back on fear. And as I said, I've written this book on fear. The book really was born from the presentations, the workshops that I did with a friend for about 18 months. We had Saturday morning sessions over breakfast, and we looked at different aspects of fear. And when we started, I didn't even know that there was so much around fear. So it's given me an opportunity to do research, and I continue to explore other aspects of fear. And then in the book that I wrote, I talk about my own personal experiences around fear. So the first question that we look at is why fear? And the answer to that is because fear has stopped a lot of people from doing what they want to do, from stepping into their greatness, from pursuing goals that they have set up for themselves. Sometimes people know that they are gifted in particular areas, but there's so much fear that then consumes them, and they end up not pursuing those things. And of course, we live in South Africa. There's so much that happens in our country. There's negative things that we have to deal with that bring about a lot of fear. And some of that fear paralyzes people, So I always just remind people that listen to these talks that even though there is potential for fear, we are able to live lives that are courageous. So we also look at the fact that fear comes within a cluster of other related emotions, shall I call them, experiences. There's emotions of shame, there's emotions of anxiety that kind of belong in the same bucket, with fear. And we won't talk a lot about shame and anxiety, but just at the back of our minds to know that they also fit into the whole fear story. And this is my favorite quotation, which I've also put in the book, is by Vincent van Gogh. And it says, if you hear a voice within you say, you cannot paint, then by all means paint, and that voice will be silenced. So this talks to the fact that when we confront our fears, we strengthen the courage muscle that we have to be able, to do whatever it is that we need to do. Sometimes with fear still screaming, I think it's Joyce Meyer who's got a book that says, do it afraid. So I've learned through, the many months that I've been doing this work that sometimes you don't have to wait for the fear to go, but you have to just do whatever it is that you need to do with the fear, like really screaming at you, as I said, yeah. So there's also these dynamics around fear and gender, that men and women have different life scripts around fear. So the upbringing for a lot of men, when they look at gender dynamics, as an example at home, the fact that men are kind of not expected to be fearful. And even when we were doing the workshops, we found that majority of people that came to the workshops were women. The men don't easily own up to being fearful because of the script out there of how men are supposed to show up as, And then women are more comfortable to own up to their fears, and they generally are working on their fears. And there's also a link to upbringing, Women have seen, maybe their mothers, sometimes being in abusive situations. They've seen women that they respect who've been like paralyzed by fear, So they almost like copy, those behaviors and identify, with those behaviors which are results of fear. So we look at a few manifestations. How does fear show up? Fear shows up differently in different people. So this David Kane person, he's done work on procrastination. And he says procrastination is not just about not doing what you're supposed to do now. Sometimes it is just that, but also sometimes it's because people have that neurotic self-defense behavior that develops to protect their sense of self-worth. So what does this mean in simple English? It means you want to do something and you just have a fear that you're not the right person to do that. You want to submit that proposal and you're thinking, who's going to want to hear my opinion? Who's going to give me an opportunity? I'm not good enough, So it talks about your own sense of self-worth. And because of those feelings and those beliefs, then the person ends up not submitting that proposal. They end up not writing that book, not making that music, because they just feeling there is no one who will be interested in my work because I'm not like so and so, And then there's also the whole thing on struggling with options, the paralysis that comes around options. There's a book written by Marcus Buckingham. It's a book that he's written about the research that they've done around women and options. It's very fascinating. And it talks to how when we grew up, as an example, let me make an example of washing powder. There was Omo and Surf. So if your household was not using Omo, they were using Surf, and that's it. Today, when you go into a shop, into a store, there's an aisle of different powdered soap. And there's people who just struggle with it. In fact, I'm one of the people, I don't like a lot of options. I just find that they waste my time having to navigate and think this one or that one or that one or that one, So when there's two things to choose from, it's easy. So because of that, people become fearful of making the wrong choice. If you have to choose between two people, it's not as daunting as having to choose between 10 things, because people keep thinking, oh, what if this is the wrong one? What if I miss an opportunity, etc. So that also that's fear manifesting in the area of options. And then there's also fear of success. So a lot of the times, people are not even aware that they fear success. And I see this when I coach, because I also work as a leadership coach. And it's very interesting. It's something that, after a while, when you're working with somebody, you begin, to then find out that people are not doing what they're wanting to do because there's just this fear of success. There's messages that we grow up with. There's people who've grown up with messages of negativity around successful people, around having money, etc. And sometimes they're not even conscious that they have those beliefs around them. And then, of course, there's fear of failure, which almost links up to that thing around options, because when people fear to fail, then they don't step out. They don't get to risk. They don't get to do things. And then there's also abusive behaviors that some people would have experienced. And then as a result, they're fearful of, being their authentic self because they are not welcome to show up in the fullness of who they are. And then withdrawal, some people, they withdraw when they are fearful, again, just being scared of putting themselves out there because of fears of what, will people receive me? Will they receive my message? Will they receive my gift, etc.? And then another manifestation is in addiction, sometimes people it starts off with just wanting to calm the nerves, and then it becomes something that you always have to do. And then sometimes it gets to a point where it overcomes, the person, and then they don't even get to do what they need to do. And then imposter syndrome. So I do a lot of, I have a lot of conversations around imposter syndrome with women especially, and men also have imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is that message that comes, in your head when you're supposed to say, maybe stand up and speak to an audience. You've done that before. But suddenly, when you are just about to stand up, it's like 5 minutes before you go on stage, and the voice says to you, who do you think you are? You know, did you see the so-and-so in the audience? You know, you're not good enough, etc. You know, so you begin to doubt yourself, but not doubt in a little way, but doubt really big, where you're feeling that, you know, it looks like you're a fraud, and somebody's going to find out that you are a fraud, and you're going to be embarrassed, etc. And this imposter syndrome has killed a lot of dreams, because unless you are aware of it, you are not able to deal with it. And if you don't deal with it, it can really sabotage your efforts. So those are just some of the few ways that fear manifests. And the cost of fear. So physically, a lot of people suffer from stress. So there's a lot of stress that is as a result of fear. And I quoted Louise Hay here, who says, clear the mental pattern that creates the condition. So whatever condition it is that is making you fearful, you have to deal with the mental pattern. And then when we self-sabotage, you know, again, is what fear would cost us. Because when people have given you the opportunity, they want, you know, to read your book, they want to hear your song or whatever, but you just have this fear, then you sabotage yourself. You don't go out to share your gifts with the world. You are always on edge, you know, and when you are on edge, instead of falling into the doing, you fall backwards into the withholding, you know, because you think you're not good enough, you think your gift will not be welcome. And then the fear, the other cost is compliance, where you become too scared to stand up for what you believe, maybe because you're in the minority in terms of a belief. So you find it's easier to agree than to not agree, you know, and this is how you then become compliant and you don't stand up for the things that you believe. Okay, here in that conference I was talking on, there also were issues around technology. But there's also a lot of fear around technology. And there's a lot of excitement and anticipation, but here we're talking about fear. So there's a lot of people who don't get to maximize on the technology that is available, you know, to improve on their offering. And yeah, I've got that quotation also about the future is not what it used to be. And that's our reality, that whatever it is that we know about technology today, next week, next month, it's improved, it's changed. So we need to keep ourselves abreast with what you know, technology is bringing onto our shores. And then, of course, during the COVID, and I see the numbers of COVID, I don't know if you guys are aware, it's beginning to rise, you know. So again, is living with COVID now, but this was like in the, I think when COVID started, what, 2020, 2021, and we're talking around, you know, just the fear around COVID. You know, of course, a lot of us have been impacted by COVID directly or indirectly, and we're talking about COVID and the impact of 4IR, you know, and what are the fears and the anxieties that are laden in this era that we're living in. And dealing with fear, just a few ideas. What would I do if I wasn't fearful? So if fear is something that you struggle with, just ask yourself that question, that what is it that you do if you're not fearful? Because then that is where the work for you begins. And you need to look at it as something that is present, continuous, that some people don't ever get to lose the fear. But like I said, they get to learn to do it fearfully, you know. So develop the skills that you need to be able to not let fear hold you back. Be very clear about what you want, what you need, what you allow. Because when you operate from a place of clarity, it helps you. You don't have to explain a lot. You know, you just go out there and you make demands, you know, whatever that you need. You make an offering, whatever that you're able to offer. Clarity, one of the leadership people says, It's great for, how does he put it? Something like clarity. Yeah, it's good for getting you, I don't remember the quotation proper, maybe it will come back, but it's a beautiful quotation. Clarity precedes mastery. Yes, I've remembered. So if you want to be a master in your area, clarity is very, very important. And then the framing is also helpful. When you frame, framing is about, it's almost like like telling yourself, like when you start your day, you frame your day by speaking into your day. So when you go into a meeting, you frame the meeting. You're saying, I'm walking into this meeting in all of my courageous self, and this is what I'm going to be doing. This is my contribution, etc. So when you get into the habit of framing what you do, when you look at the language that you use, because sometimes it's the language that we use that brings a lot of fear, in ourselves. But you can use a language that brings, the courageous self, that helps you to remain cautious, of being fearful. And when you speak in a language of fear, catch yourself so that you can correct yourself and then move back to being the courageous you. And then Miles Monroe spoke about begin with the end in mind. When you do that, it's also part of framing. It helps you because it brings clarity to what you're going to be doing. Professor Zander, who is a leadership person, he's a choir orchestra conductor, and he uses music to teach leadership. He says when he starts with a new class of students, he tells all of them that they have an A. So this is before they are taught, this is before they sit for exams. And what does it do? Psychologically, they all strive to getting an A. So he finds that none of them fail because he's already, you see, that's the framing. He's already framed that they all good, they belong there, and the world is waiting to hear their music. And it's just amazing what it does psychologically to the students. And Johnny Clegg, I liked this saying, it's in Sizulu, or I think it's Xhosa. He was asked by a radio person who was interviewing him when he was still struggling with cancer. And he said, so how are you doing? And he said, Inkanyo Pila, we just, and Inkanyo Pila talks about almost the stubbornness of doing life. So he was saying, I'm getting on. I'm not giving up. I'm not giving in. But I'll continue to have the courage, to do life because I'm here, I'm alive, So I like to use that phrase when I talk about fear, that every day, that everything that we do, we must have inkanyo pila. We must show up, and be there. And also manage your inner critic. Some of us have a lot more inner critic. Some people have less. But whatever it is that is inside your head, that self-talk, those voices, manage them, engage them, tell them, it's time for you to shush because now I'm doing X, Y, Z, and something that has worked for me because fear used to consume me a lot. And I've been in areas work-wise and professionally where I've had to, be in front of people to lead, etc. What I would do is I'll tell the audience that I'm very, very, like intimidated or I'm very nervous and whatever. I found that when I do that, the people become so compassionate and empathetic. And you can see that in their eyes and, in their faces. And that then helps me to then ease, slowly just ease. And as I continue, I find that I relax. And then, the fear almost like takes a back seat. So I've never been afraid to own up when I'm feeling fearful. So in conclusion, the question is, how conscious are you to your fears? And what is it that needs to happen for you from right now going forward? Thank you.